Marcus was 43. He walked into that bar like he owned nothing in it. No designer jacket, no flashy watch. He ordered a single drink, said nothing to anyone. And within 20 minutes, a woman he had never met crossed the room and sat next to him. Not beside him. Next to him. Close enough to touch. She stayed for 2 hours. Now, here is the part that matters. There were younger men in that bar, richer men. Men who had been trying all night. Men who had been working the room since 10 o'clock. None of them got what Marcus got without trying. So what did Marcus have that they did not? It was not confidence. Not in the way most men understand that word. It was not charm. It was not some secret technique or social hack. It was something far darker, far older, and far more uncomfortable to look at. Marcus had been broken. Completely. And he had put himself back together in a way that made him dangerous. That is what this video is about. The psychology behind why certain older men become magnetic. Not attractive in the normal sense. Magnetic. The kind of pull a woman feels before she understands why. The kind that bypasses her rational mind entirely and goes straight to something primal. But here is what I need you to understand before we go any further. This is not about becoming someone you are not. This is not a performance. Women are far too sharp for performances. They have been reading men their entire lives. They can feel fake from across a room. What we are talking about is the opposite of fake. We are talking about becoming so honest with yourself, so ruthlessly honest, that it terrifies you. And that terror is exactly what makes you irresistible. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human mind. He called one part of us the shadow. The shadow is everything we have buried, everything we have denied, every weakness, every desire, every ugly truth we refused to look at. Jung did not say the shadow was evil. He said it was powerful. He said that every man who refuses to face his shadow becomes hollow, and hollow men are invisible to women. But the man who faces his shadow, who looks at every broken piece and does not run, Jung called that the masterpiece of psychological development. Marcus was that man. So here is what I want you to pay attention to, because this is where most men get it completely wrong. They think attraction is about what they add to themselves. A better body, more money, a sharper wardrobe. But the psychology says the opposite. Attraction. Real attraction. The kind that makes a woman's body respond before her mind catches up, comes from what you remove. The masks, the pretenses, the desperate need to be seen a certain way. Robert Greene wrote extensively about this. He studied seduction across centuries of human history. And his conclusion was blunt. He said, seduction is a game of psychology, not beauty. The men who master it are not the most handsome men in the room. They are the men whose energy carries weight, the men who have something going on beneath the surface that the viewer cannot quite name but cannot look away from. That energy has a source, and the source is pain that has been transformed. Arthur Schopenhauer understood something that most philosophers after him tried to ignore. He said that all desire springs from lack. Every human being is driven by an internal hunger that can never be fully satisfied. We spend our entire lives chasing things to fill that hunger. Money, status, pleasure. And none of it works. The hunger remains. But here is what Schopenhauer also understood. The man who finally stops running from that hunger, the man who sits with it, examines it, and decides to use it as fuel instead of a curse, that man becomes fundamentally different from everyone around him. Women feel that difference. They cannot always explain it. but they feel it the way you feel a change in temperature when you walk into a cold room. Now I am going to tell you exactly how this transformation works. But I need you to stay with me, because the next segment is going to get uncomfortable. We are going to talk about the specific thing most men are running from, the one thing they spend their entire lives trying to avoid. And it is the exact thing that is keeping them invisible. Do not skip ahead. This is where it starts. Think about the last time you felt genuinely afraid of yourself. Not afraid of something outside you. Afraid of what is inside. Most men never go there. They build an entire life designed to avoid that moment. They stay busy. They chase goals. They keep moving. Because the second they stop, the second they actually sit still and look inward, something comes up that they are not ready to face. Friedrich Nietzsche called this the crisis of self-overcoming. He wrote that the greatest power a man can develop is not power over others. It is power over himself. But reaching that power requires walking straight into the darkest part of your own psychology. Into the part you have spent years pretending does not exist. Nietzsche called this process brutal. He did not dress it up. He said that to become what you are, you must first destroy what you have been performing. Here is what that looks like in practice. Take a man named Elliot, 38 years old. Good job. Decent apartment. He spent years trying to date. He would show up to every interaction performing. He would say the right things. He would act unbothered. He would play the game the way he thought the game was supposed to be played. And it never worked. Not once did a woman look at him the way he wanted to be looked at. One night, after another failed attempt, Elliot did something he had never done before. He sat alone in his apartment, turned off every screen, and asked himself one question. Who am I when no one is watching? The answer destroyed him. He realized that everything he had been showing women, the confidence, the humor, the ease, was a costume. And underneath that costume was a man who was terrified. Terrified of rejection. Terrified of not being enough. Terrified of the fact that he did not actually know who he was without the performance. Jung would have called Eliot's moment the breakdown of the persona. The persona is the mask we wear for the world. Jung said that when the persona breaks, it feels like death. Because in a way, it is. The false version of you dies. But what comes after the death of the persona is the beginning of real power. Eliot spent the next year doing something most men would never do. He stopped performing entirely. He stopped trying to impress anyone. He started facing every uncomfortable truth about himself. His insecurities, his fears, his genuine desires. The parts of him he had been hiding since he was a teenager. He stopped scrolling through other men's lives online. He stopped comparing himself. He started writing down the things he actually felt, not the things he thought he should feel. He started noticing how often he changed his behavior based on who was watching him. It was not pleasant. Some days, it felt like he was falling apart. Some weeks, he questioned whether any of this was worth the pain. But here is what happened after. 18 months later, Elliot walked into a social event. He was not trying to meet anyone. He was not playing a role. He was just there. Present. Quiet. Still. A woman named Sarah noticed him within the first 10 minutes. Not because he was doing anything. Because he was doing nothing. And the way he was doing nothing was different from the way everyone else in the room was doing something. Sarah told a friend later that being near Elliot felt like standing next to something solid in a room full of smoke. That is the effect of shadow integration. Jung described it as the man becoming whole. Not perfect, whole. And wholeness is one of the most seductive qualities a human being can possess. Machiavelli understood something related to this, though from a completely different angle. He studied power for decades, and he came to a conclusion that most people find uncomfortable. He said that the men who appear most virtuous are often the least trustworthy, but the men who have genuinely confronted their own darkness, who know exactly what they are capable of, both good and bad, those men carry a kind of authority that cannot be faked. Machiavelli called this knowing the nature of things as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. Women respond to that authority, not consciously, not as a choice. It registers in their nervous system before their brain processes it. Now here is where this gets even deeper. Because what Eliot discovered, what Marcus carried with him into that bar, is not just about facing your fear. It is about what you do after you face it. And that is where the real transformation happens. Stay with me. The next part changes everything. Let me give you a concrete picture of what presence actually looks like. Not a theory, a real picture. A woman named Christina once described what it felt like to be around a man she called completely different from every other man she had ever met. She said it was not about what he said. He actually spoke less than most men she knew. It was the quality of his silence. She said his silence felt like a room with solid walls. Calm, stable, grounded. That description maps directly onto what Robert Greene spent years analyzing. Greene studied the most magnetically attractive men across history, and he found one trait that separated them from everyone else. He called it presence, and he defined it as the state of being entirely comfortable with who you are, to the point where you no longer need the outside world to confirm your value. Greene made something else clear. Presence cannot be manufactured. You cannot fake it the way you fake confidence. Confidence can be performed. Presence cannot, because presence is the result of internal work that either has been done or has not. So how do you build it? Nietzsche gave us the framework. He wrote about what he called amor fati, a Latin phrase that means the love of fate. Nietzsche argued that the most powerful men in history were not the ones who avoided suffering. They were the ones who embraced it, who looked at every painful experience and said yes to it, who used pain as raw material instead of something to escape from. This is not about being masochistic. This is about training your relationship with discomfort until discomfort no longer controls you. Here is how this plays out in the context of attraction. Consider two men. Both are 45. Both have been through serious losses. Divorce, career failure, financial collapse. The full spectrum of what life throws at people. The first man, call him Raymond, spent years after his losses trying to rebuild his image. He bought better clothes. He traveled. He posted curated versions of his life online. He was running from what happened to him, and women could feel that running. They could sense the instability beneath the surface. Every interaction with Raymond felt like standing on sand. The second man, call him Thomas, went through the same losses. But Thomas did the opposite. He stopped running. He faced every consequence of what had happened. He grieved. He questioned. He sat with the discomfort until it became something he could hold without flinching. 2 years later, Thomas walked into a room and the energy shifted. Not dramatically, subtly, but it shifted. People listened when he spoke, even though he spoke quietly. Women gravitated toward him without being approached. One woman told a mutual friend that being near Thomas made her feel like the world was not going to collapse. That is presence, and it is built from exactly what most men are trying to escape. David Buss spent decades studying what women actually select for in men. His research across 37 cultures showed that women's nervous systems are wired to detect instability. It registers almost instantly. A man who reacts emotionally to every provocation. A man whose confidence wavers when challenged. A man whose energy shifts based on how the room receives him. These are all instability signals, and they shut down attraction faster than almost anything else. Presence is the antidote. It is the signal that says, I am not going anywhere. I am not going to be moved by things that should not move me. I am not looking to you for my sense of self. Now here is the psychological mechanism behind why this is so powerful. Schopenhauer wrote that human beings are trapped in a cycle of desire and disappointment. We want, we chase, we get, we feel empty, we want again. This cycle creates constant internal tension. A man with genuine presence has stepped partially outside that cycle. He has reduced his dependency on external validation to the point where his internal state remains stable regardless of what happens around him. When a woman encounters that kind of stability, true stability, not performed stability, her own nervous system relaxes. She does not have to manage him. She does not have to read him. She does not have to wonder what mood he is in or how he will react. That relaxation is the foundation of desire. Not excitement, not drama, relaxation. The feeling of safety that allows everything else to build on top of it. But presence is only the foundation. The next layer is where things get genuinely dangerous. And I mean that in the best possible way. Stay with me. Here is the part most men in this space completely ignore. And it is the part that separates the men women sleep with from the men women simply find pleasant to be around. Presence alone makes you trustworthy. But trustworthiness does not create desire by itself. Desire requires something else, something darker, something that Greene called the controlled flame. Greene studied the most seductive men across centuries, and he found that every single one of them carried a visible tension. Not chaos, not instability, tension. The difference is crucial. Chaos repels. Tension pulls. Think about it this way. A candle that burns completely evenly, no flicker, no variation, is boring. Your eye passes over it. But a flame that moves, that shifts and dances while still holding its shape, that draws your eye. You cannot look away. That is the controlled flame. It is intensity that has been disciplined, passion that has been contained, power that is visible but not unleashed. And building it requires something most men will not do. A man named Kai learned this the hard way. He had done the inner work. He had faced his shadow. He had built genuine presence. Women found him calm, grounded, trustworthy, but they did not sleep with him. They liked him. They felt safe around him. But the desire was not there. Kai spent months trying to figure out what was missing. The answer came from an unexpected direction. He started studying Nietzsche seriously, and one passage stopped him cold. Nietzsche wrote that a strong nature manifests itself by waiting and postponing reaction. But that same strong nature also possesses an inner fire that does not go out. The two are not contradictions. They are partners. Kai realized his mistake. In the process of becoming calm, he had become flat. He had overcorrected. He had removed all the edges from himself in an attempt to become stable. But edges are what create intrigue. Edges are what make a woman lean in instead of simply feeling comfortable. So Kai started working on what we might call strategic intensity. Not random aggression, not unnecessary drama. Calculated moments where his passion, his opinions, his desires became visible. He stopped agreeing with everything. He started expressing what he actually thought, even when it created friction. He allowed himself to be moved by things, genuinely moved, while maintaining his core stability. Within 3 months, the dynamic shifted completely. This is where Machiavelli becomes relevant again. Machiavelli wrote that the most effective leaders understand the balance between being feared and being loved. He argued that fear creates reliability. People do not disappoint someone they fear. And love creates loyalty. But a leader who inspires only one of the two is always vulnerable. The same psychology applies to attraction. A man who is only trustworthy is replaceable. A man who is only intense is exhausting. But a man who is both stable and fierce, calm and passionate, predictable in his character, but unpredictable in his energy, that man creates a psychological dependency that is almost impossible to walk away from. Greene called this the alternating current, heat and coolness in rhythm. Not random, deliberate. A woman does not know when the heat is coming, so she stays alert. She stays curious. She stays engaged. Now here is what makes this work on a deeper level. Jung wrote about something he called the anima, the feminine archetype that lives inside every man's unconscious mind. Jung argued that when a man integrates his anima, he develops emotional depth. He becomes capable of understanding feminine psychology not as something foreign, but as something that lives inside him. Men who have integrated their anima do not chase women. They do not perform for women. They understand women. And that understanding creates a magnetic pull that no technique or tactic could ever replicate. The controlled flame is not something you add on top of presence. It is the natural result of a man who has done the full integration work. The shadow, the anima, the fears, the desires, all of it brought into the light and made conscious. When that integration is complete, the controlled flame emerges on its own. You do not have to manufacture it. You do not have to plan it. It simply becomes part of who you are. But there is one final piece, and this is the piece that determines whether any of this actually works in your life or stays as theory you watched on a screen one evening and forgot about by morning. Stay until the end. This last part is the only part that actually matters. Everything I have told you up to this point is true. But none of it will change your life unless you understand one final mechanism. And this mechanism is brutally simple. You have to actually do the work, not think about it, not plan to do it next month, not read another book about it. Do it. Now. Tonight. Starting the moment this video ends. Here is why most men never get there. And this is not a criticism. This is just the psychology, laid out honestly. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle is the way. The thing you are most resistant to doing is the thing that will change your life the fastest. Every man who has watched a video like this one has felt something shift inside him. A flash of recognition. That is what has been missing. And then the video ends, and the feeling fades, and nothing changes. Schopenhauer called this the pendulum. We swing from wanting change to avoiding the discomfort of change. Back and forth, forever, unless we break the cycle deliberately. Breaking it requires one thing: action before the feeling disappears. So, here is what I am going to give you. Not another framework, not another model. A single, concrete practice. One thing. Do this one thing, and everything else will start to follow. Tonight, after you finish watching this, find a mirror. A bathroom mirror works. Stand in front of it. Look directly into your own eyes. And ask yourself out loud, not in your head. 3 questions. First question, who am I pretending to be? Not who do you wish you were? Not who do you think you should be? Who are you pretending to be right now? In your actual life, today. Second question, What am I most afraid to admit about myself? This one will hurt. Good. That is the shadow showing its face. Do not look away. Jung spent his career telling us that the shadow does not disappear when you ignore it. It gets stronger. Third question, what do I actually want? Not what society wants for you. Not what your parents wanted for you. Not what the internet tells you you should want. What do you, the real person underneath all the layers, actually want from your life? You do not have to answer these questions perfectly. You do not have to have a plan. You just have to be honest. Brutally, painfully, uncomfortably honest. Do this every night for 30 days. 30 days. Not 30 minutes. 30 days of 2 minutes each. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was born into slavery, wrote that freedom begins the moment you stop caring about what you cannot control and start taking full responsibility for what you can. The only thing you can fully control is your own mind, your own honesty, your own willingness to look at yourself clearly. Everything else, the way women respond to you, the way the world perceives you, the energy you carry into every room, those are consequences. They follow from the source, and the source is you, the real you, not the version you have been showing people. Now, I want to be direct with you about something. This is not going to feel good at first. The first few days of the mirror practice will be uncomfortable. You will want to stop. You will want to rationalize. You will want to tell yourself this is unnecessary. That resistance is exactly the shadow talking. It is the part of you that has been running the show for years, the part that built the persona, the part that decided long ago that the real you was not acceptable. And it will fight to stay hidden. Do not let it win. Nietzsche wrote that the man who becomes what he is has gone through the most difficult path a human being can walk. Not the most dangerous, the most difficult, because it requires facing yourself with no escape route and no one to blame. The men like Marcus and Eliot and Thomas did not stumble into their magnetic presence. They walked straight into the darkest room inside themselves and stayed there until their eyes adjusted. And when their eyes adjusted, they saw something extraordinary. They saw that the darkness was not actually dark. It was just unexplored. And once it was explored, it became power. That power is not something women chase. It is something women recognize. The way an animal recognizes safety, instinctively. Before thought enters the picture, you have spent your entire life building the outside, the clothes, the career, the reputation, the curated version of yourself that you maintain like a garden. Now it is time to build the inside, not because it will make women want you, although it will. Build it because it is the only version of yourself that is actually real. And real is the only thing that lasts. Start tonight. The mirror is already in your bathroom. The questions are already in your mind. All that is left is the decision to look. And once you look, you cannot unsee what you find. That is where the real power begins.